That's one of those rules that a character should grow, should change, should be different at the end of the story than at the beginning. And you can certainly write good stories where that happens. But I think about the Maltese Falcon. Bogart's character's the same guy at the end as that he was at the beginning. And he's great. I want to see his next case.
Hi, and welcome to the Innovative Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Isolde Trachtenberg. On the show, you'll get my conversations with peak-performing thought leaders, creatives, and entrepreneurs. Every week, I bring you the latest scoop on what these incredible people do to succeed and how you can get their secrets and do it too. And hey, do you want to become a member of the Innovative Virtuoso Club? Our virtuosos get all sorts of exclusive content like bonus episodes just for you and videos to boost creative adrenaline and problem-solving juice. Go to isoldet.com/virtuoso to learn more. And now, let's get on with the show. Hello, and welcome to the Innovative Mindset Podcast. My name is Isolde Trachtenberg, and I am super thrilled that you are here, and I am so thrilled to have this week's guests on the show. Let me tell you about him. Bill Fitzhugh is the award-winning author of 10 comic and satiric crime novels, all of which I've read and all of which I love. I have to say that first. His debut, Pest Control, was translated into 6 languages, and the film rights were sold to Warner Brothers, and it was produced as a popular radio show in Germany and as a stage musical in LA. And prior to Human Resources, his most recent novel, Bill published The Exterminator, sort of the sequel to Pest Control. And the New York Times has said that Fitzhugh was in a league with Carl Hiaasen and Elmore Leonard. He's he's a strange and deadly amalgam of screenwriter and comic novelist. This is all true, folks. This is all true. The late, great political humorist Molly Ivins said, Fitzhugh is one seriously funny guy. Also true. A one-time FM rock DJ, he wrote, produced, and hosted Fitzhugh's all-hand mixed vinyl for 5 years on SiriusXM's Deep Tracks channel. Born and raised in Jackson, Mississippi. Jackson, not Jaxus. I don't know why I said Jaxus. Born and raised in Jackson, Mississippi. Fitzhugh lives in LA, where he is at work on his next project, and one I cannot wait to read. Welcome, Bill. I'm so glad that you're here.
Hello, thank you.
This is so fabulous. It's funny. We started talking and we were both going, wait, is this rolling? We should be rolling. We should be rolling this, because we found that we have some similar history, and I want to delve into that. But also, I just want to say first, before we go any further, I love your work. I love it. So
thank you so much. You can't hear enough of that.
Oh, well, and I can't say it enough. My husband actually brought home organ grinders for me 20 some odd years ago and said, you must read this. And I did. And I went, oh, and then I grabbed Pest Control and have grabbed everything you've read as soon as I've written. I mean, as soon as it comes out, I've read it. So I just adore it. And,
well, I'm sorry to interrupt.
But no, please.
Like, if I had to do everything over again, the organ grinders, first of all, would not be the first book I would want anyone to read. And secondly, I would want it later in like my 3rd or 4th book, and I would like to edit it again. But other than that, I think it's okay.
That's so funny. I don't know any writer who doesn't want to go back to their earlier work and reconstruct it and deconstruct it and edit it and do so many things differently. So I'm not surprised you say that. But what makes you say that about that book in particular? Because I adore it.
Well, Pest Control, which, by the way, I would leave exactly as it is, even though it has plenty of flaws, and I'm a better writer now than I was then. I think it's got its charm, and it's fine just as it is. Mm-hmm. But that was based on a screenplay that I had written with a friend of mine, and so the plot was all worked out. The characters were mostly worked out. The novel allowed it to be fleshed out more and let me do a lot of research that you don't put in a screenplay. So that's where all the insect stuff came in. Mm-hmm. That was just sort of a story in the screenplay. You saw the bugs and stuff, but you didn't see all of the insect research that's in the novel, mm-hmm. in the screenplay. So it was easy to turn into a novel because a lot of the work had been done. So The Organ Grinders was the first novel I had written from scratch. Mm. And and I fell in love with the research, all the xenografting research and the biotech research. And I was fascinated by it. So I was going to make sure you were fascinated by it too. And it got, so I put too much of it in.
Hmm.
I would, so anyway, I wrote, liked the story, sent it in, and the editor who was supposed to work on it then was promoted, not because of she got my book, but she was promoted.
Mm.
So she handed it to the next editor,
Mhm.
who then promptly moved into the advertising business. So she then hands it off to Tom Dupree. Excuse me, I've got to clear my throat. Who thought, well, two editors have already worked on this. I don't need to do much.
Ah.
And being a rookie at that point, pretty much, I thought, well, look how good I am. They don't really have to, edit much of my stuff.
Hmm.
But it would benefit from probably 15% of it coming out.
Hmm.
And I would make Paul Simon a slightly less Boy Scout kind of a guy.
Hmm.
But everything else I believe. Artie, I thought was great fun.
Uh-huh.
The baboons, the guys hunting the transgenic baboons. It's just weird, funny stuff. So I like the rest of it, but it could be trimmed down and improved, I think.
Hmm.
And speaking of that, I have a new publisher is going to reissue all of my work, and I raised the idea of doing that editing for a new edition. So that's a possibility.
Wow. Well, I'm going to hold on to my tattered copy and I'll get the new one too. But
Okay.
yeah, I mean, so much, it's really interesting to me. So much of your work revolves around people who are, like some of the characters in the book, very environmentally aware, and then take that to some extremes. How does that relate to who you are and what your beliefs are?
Well, let's see. I normally think of my stories as normal people thrown into abnormal situations.
Mm.
Bob Dylan in Pest Control was just a guy working for a pest control company, and a series of things happened that throw him into a very unusual circumstance that he has to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And same with Paul Simon. Well, Paul's an environmentalist. He's trying to gather signatures and do things. So I'm not that active. I don't stand outside grocery stores and try to get people to sign petitions.
Right.
Not that I think there's anything wrong with it. I'm here working.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking at covers of the books, trying to think of, am I like that guy? Am I like that guy? Yeah, sort of. None of the characters, except for their professional skills. I mean, I'm not an entomologist, so I don't know all the bug stuff that Bob did. I could look it up and I could fake that I knew it. And the guy in Fender Benders is a writer. So how hard was that? And he's from Mississippi, so yay, that was easy.
Mm-hmm.
Same with Rick Shannon. So yeah, there's a lot of the stuff for the protagonists that are parts of me, and I think it's true for most writers. I mean, I hear a lot of writers say that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've written 2 fiction novels, and it's about a fairy godmother, so probably there's not that much. But you're a storyteller, and you started, I assume, young. What made you want to tell stories? Like some of you, it lives in every one of your books, for example. But what made you decide? And I think you were you wrote screenplays really before you started on books. How did that happen? What made you say storytelling is the thing I want to do?
Well, it was not a conscious thing. The story that I tell, I do remember as a kid, and I don't know what age, 10 years old, 12 years old, getting in some sort of trouble and being sent to my room. And while there, and I was, I was unjustly sent to my room.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote the story about, the some wild animal that was caged but needed to be free because, what his wildness was, the thing he was supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was great. It didn't get me out of the room any sooner after I slipped it under the door to my bail keeper. But and I'm sure that was thrown away immediately. But flash forward, and you used to take aptitude tests in grade school, and they would show them to you, and you could see that you were strong in certain areas or weak in certain areas, or you knew everything, or you were a complete moron, or whatever the test showed. And mine always showed very high aptitude for language, vocabulary, retention, things like that, and very poorly in math, which continues to this day. But instead of anyone saying, well, let's focus on your strengths, they just said, look, you need to work harder on your math, which, was frustrating because I was terrible at it. So anyway, so I knew, according to the tests, that I had some verbal skills, and I just sort of drifted that way without making an effort. At some point, and this gets us back to what we were talking about before we started the show. Excuse me. In high school, when I was D'ing my way through algebra class, the Junior Achievement Program came to school, and I didn't know much about it. Are you familiar with Junior Achievement? Okay, so businesses pair up with high school students, and you form little companies, and you elect a president and a vice president and a marketing person, and you sort of form a little company, and you decide on a product, and somebody sells it, and somebody else does the advertising, and so forth. And most of them, I think, make ashtrays or pot holders or stuff. But one of the companies was sponsored by Lamar Life Insurance Company, and they owned WJDX AM and WZZQ FM, and the biggest radio stations in the state of Mississippi.
Right.
And everyone listened to ZZQ at that point. So I signed up for that. And some other guys who had done Junior Achievement a year before that, and I didn't know them, they were from a public school, and I was at a Catholic school. They decided to do a political show. So we, and for some reason, let me see. No, I don't think I was the host of that. Yeah, I was. Anyway, so some politician came in, and a bunch of numbskull high school students are asking, innocent questions, and they're getting pablum back from this guy. And this is airing on a rock radio station at 7:00 Sunday mornings. And I thought, well, this is a terrible idea. So I talked to a few of the other people in our company, and decided to stage a takeover, which we did. We voted the guys out of office, and we took over and proposed that we write our rock and roll biography shows, which I completely wrote and produced, and and that was great. So that we did like 13 of these half-hour shows, and I was the host, the voice. So, and that had me, having to time out segments of songs, and I got good at math because, you're working with, I don't know, is that base 6?
Yeah, I think it's base 6.
Talking about 60 seconds and
Right.
so forth. So I was having to calculate, minutes. And so I and the show weren't great. And then I was hanging out, and this is a 100,000 watt FM radio station, reached like 7 states in the South.
Wow.
And I was hanging out with the guys we used to listen to, and they were very friendly, and they taught me, how to do stuff. And I just, when the series ended, the Junior Achievement series ended, I just kept showing back up at the radio station every day. And the receptionist She didn't know not to let me go back there.
Wow.
And eventually, and this may have been true for you too. You just said, "I'll work here for free." And the management at radio stations, probably even to this day, will always let someone work for free.
Sure.
And so I did, and hung out and hung out. Finally, they hired me to pay, $2.35 an hour, or whatever the minimum wage was back in '76. And so ended up during high school, I was doing 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. shifts, and then going to high schools where my grades couldn't have gotten much worse anyway. And then ended up staying there after graduating high school, and ended up doing the morning show for a while. And then so that's the common thread we have in radio. But that was writing. So I was writing 30-second commercials and 60-second commercials. Then I wrote a end of the year radio show that was 3 or 4 hours.
Mm.
And then later, after moving to Seattle, met up with a guy, and we were writing a radio comedy show. So we were writing 2 and 3 and 4 minute sketches. Then decided wanted to move to Los Angeles to write sitcoms. So that's a move up to 30-minute scripts. Then decided to start writing screenplays. So then you're moving up to 2-hour scripts. Then adapted a screenplay into a novel. So I just kept writing progressively larger things.
Mm-hmm.
And it was great training to do that. But it was completely, it wasn't a plan to do it that way. That's just how it worked out.
And some of those formats of writing are very similar, but some are really quite strikingly different. And this notion, I wrote a PSA and then I transitioned, and then I transitioned again, and now I'm writing novels. It seems like it's a kind of a meandering path, but I can see how you went from one to the other. What's different for you from writing for radio versus writing a screenplay or a novel?
I don't know that I think of it. With radio, you want to keep in mind what you can do orally.
Mm-hmm.
What sounds you can put in that will tell part of the story, in the same way that when you're writing a screenplay, the pictures can do some of the work for you.
Mm-hmm.
The characters the actors will fill out parts of the characters that you don't, so you don't write a bunch of character description and he makes this little, he's got this twitch, and the actors will do all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So you just write, to do the stuff that the cinematographer and the director and the actors aren't going to do. You give them, a blueprint to make a final product with. A screenplay is not a final product. It's, any more than a blueprint is to a house.
Mm-hmm.
With the novel, you've got to do it all. I think I got a lot of comments about pest control and cross-dressing. It's like watching a movie. It's like, well, that's because it was originally a screenplay.
Mm-hmm.
And as I adapted it, I'm doing the stuff that the director and the actor would. I'm giving you all the details that you would see on the screen. I have no idea if I've gotten close to answering your question.
No, you absolutely have. It is something that fascinates me, though. This idea that when we're reading a book, we get to imagine the world, versus when we're watching a movie or a television show, the world is shown to us. The world that the director, the cinematographer, the set designer decided to show us is the one we see, versus in a book, it's different. So I'm always curious about how a writer navigates those two different worlds.
Yeah, and of course, the writer has to describe the house, the setting, the whatever, but different people will read the exact same words and imagine something completely different, versus if they watch the movie, they're all going to see the same thing.
Exactly. And so it's almost a once removed situation when you're writing.
So that favor, I
Say that again? I didn't hear you.
go ahead.
Uh-oh. Oh,
Hello?
uh-oh. Hello. Oh, this is going to be something we edit, or maybe not. Are you there?
Or I'm here.
I don't know what's going on. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna do. Let's see. Let's try again. Can you hear
Can
me?
you? I can hear you just fine.
Okay. Well, here's hoping I can keep hearing you. It's
Okay.
there's some. I don't know what's going on. I bet you my
Glitch.
husband. Yeah. Eh, eh, we would be frozen in time if this was video. See, as I said, I live in Brooklyn, New York, and internet is not always the greatest here. We
Oh,
sometimes have issues, as they say. So
okay.
anyway, what we were talking about was it is fascinating to me, this idea of, they say paint me a word picture, but as a writer you do that. And I have a question to ask you that you probably will go, oh pish, but I'm going to ask you anyway. So when you're studying to be a writer right now, they talk about sort of best practices. Oh, don't do a lot of description, don't give a lot of exposition, let the dialogue and the action be what holds the day. How do you feel about that as a writer yourself? What do you think about those kinds of rules for writers, and how do you either follow or not follow those rules?
Um, excuse me. Rules have some, pish.
See?
Um, Elmore Leonard's 10 rules are fun, are funny, and they have some value. Uh, I think if you've literally, if you haven't done any, if you've been um, working construction, I don't know, and I worked construction for a period of time, um, and you haven't spent years writing,
Hmm.
and you decide, well, I'm going to write a novel. Unless you read a lot of books and have some sense of, the different ways there are to put words together, you should probably read a lot of books, and maybe look at some. How do you construct a novel? Get some idea from people. Read Stephen King's On Writing.
Mm. Hmm.
Um, but I think it most of it comes from having done just thousands of hours of it, most of which are not that good, but you just keep getting better. So it's like screenwriting. When I was trying to be a screenwriter, um, and well, voiceover is terrible. Well, you can tick off a long list of great films that have an awful lot of voiceover in
Sure.
them. Now, should you try to tell the story without voiceover? Well, if you can, great. But don't follow the rules just because somebody said here are the rules. There really are no rules, except make it interesting.
Hmm.
Make the reader or the viewer want to know what happened next.
Absolutely. And I love that answer. And when you were talking about great movies, for example, with voiceover, Blade Runner comes to mind as one of my favorite movies. And obviously voiceover is liberally used, but you do sit on the edge of your seat wanting to know what happens next. And there's something compelling about being privy to someone's inner monologue, if you will, what it is they're actually thinking. And I guess maybe it's just a little bit voyeuristic. When you write, how how do your characters, this is a strange question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. I have a lot of those for you. How do your
Mhm.
characters, how do your characters learn? Because it seems to me sometimes they spend the book, some of them, the funny ones anyway, they spend the book not learning. But how do they grow? What prompts that growth for you in the stories that you write?
Well, I mean, so that's one of those rules that a character should grow, should change, should be different at the end of the story than at the beginning. And you can certainly write good stories where that happens.
Hmm.
But it's like I think about the Maltese Falcon.
Ah,
Well, Bogart's character's the same guy at the end as that he was at the beginning. You
yep.
know, and he's great. I want to see his next. case. So, I mean, my characters, like I said, if you just drop a normal person into an abnormal situation, they have, and they're obviously going to come out the other end of it, because otherwise that's not very funny. Your protagonist got his head cut off. Like, well, no, that's a terrible ending. So that, they've learned, or I don't know if they've learned, but they've managed, they've coped, they've gotten through some weird situation, and can they write up a report saying, well, here's what I learned at the end of that. It's like any, when you live life, you go through stuff, and you've maybe learned some compassion, you've learned something clever, you learn something going through difficult or strange situations. But it's I don't write the stories so that we learn or that we see the lesson that guy learned.
Mm-hmm.
It's not really about that. It's about, boy, how is he going to get out of this? And, oh, that was pretty clever. Did he learn that, or was he already clever, but he had never, he'd just never been faced with a situation where he had to show that he was clever in this way.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that I can pull out from the whole story, and here's what he learned. I don't think, if I really looked at all the stories closely, and we don't have time for that. I sort of feel like my characters, one comes to mind. Dan Steele in Cross-Dressing
Mm-hmm.
goes from being a thoroughly obsessed, self-absorbed consumer kind of guy. He's an advertising executive, and he just wants more stuff, good stuff, the best stuff, that rare scotch that he can brag about. And through the course of a series of events, he has to learn to care about people. And he does. So now that you make me think about it, there's one, he changes. But it seems like most of the characters are, kind of the same at the end. They've just accomplished something during the course of the book.
Interesting. I when you bring up Dan, I can absolutely see that. I also see Paul grows in Organ Grinders. I see Rick grows between the two books. And to me, I can see that Rick has learned a fair amount. And he certainly isn't quite as depressed as he was at the beginning.
Yeah, that's fair. But I didn't. That just seemed to me the natural course of the story, rather than I'm going to write the story so that this guy learns these or comes out of his depression into this other thing. That was just the natural result of the things that he did.
Right. And that makes sense. You don't necessarily have to plan out, and on page 256 he's going to have this revelation.
Right.
That's not what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about how it is interesting to me that we who read your work or someone else's work, we analyze what you might have meant, whether or not you meant it. We might be going, oh, the curtain is blue. What does the blue represent? And for you, it was, a blue curtain. So, so having said that, a lot of your books, well, 3 of them anyway, are about, what is the sort of the organ transplant theme, if you will. Then that's what heart seizure and human
Organ
resources
grinders,
and
heart
organ
seizure,
grinders
and human resources.
Yeah. What's the fascination there? What made you go, I'm going to write about this theme for 3 books?
So that was what we like to refer to as the transplant trilogy. Until I wrote the next book, which is also organ transplant related. So now it's the transplant tetralogy.
Wow.
I had to make sure I was happy to find out there was a word for 4 works of art, if you'll excuse me calling this art. So yeah, so the next book is, well, I'll tell you about that in a second. To answer your question, the organ grinders came about after I read a story about a guy who had AIDS and wanted like a baboon bone marrow transplant to see if that would, because there was some reason to believe that that would mitigate his problems.
Mm.
So he had to petition the FDA and stuff. And I don't think he ever received the transplant. But the word was fascinating, xenografting. I'd never seen that word. And so it's the transplantation between different species. And so I looked into the biotechnology, and just because of supply and demand, excuse me, something in my throat.
Oh, grab a drink of water. I can sing a little ditty if you want to go grab some water.
Well, I have the water. It's that's not helping this get out of it. But anyway, so demand exceeds supply for organs, and so there's money to be made.
Mm-hmm.
So the biotechnology people are saying, all right, let's see if we can figure out how to solve this problem. So anyway, I just read all the stuff about organ transplants and the way organs are distributed around the country, and it is fascinating. And while I was writing the organ grinders, I thought, oh, here's a great idea. And that was the idea at the base of heart seizure.
Mm-hmm.
And then years later, well, so after the organ grinders came out, a producer named Trevor Albert met with me because he wanted to see if we could make a movie, which we couldn't figure out what to do. Years later, and this showed, after the change in the television landscape allowed for things like The Sopranos and Breaking Bad and that sort of drama, I went back to Trevor and suggested that we try the organ grinders as that sort of a television series. Not exactly the organ grinders, but in that world of, the black market for organs and that kind of stuff. And I wrote several scripts, and we attached, his producing partner was James Keach, and we attached a showrunner from True Blood, and we went around Hollywood and nobody bought it. So then I had this other idea this television idea, and I turned that into Human Resources as a novel.
Mm-hmm.
It was somewhat different than what we had done for the screen. But the short answer is the science of transplantation just keeps coming. Here's another story. Oh, here's a completely different story than that one. Here's another one. And I'm not going to not do them because, well, you've already done a transplant story. It's like, yeah, but here's another one, and it's really good. And so the next one came about, people, where do you get your ideas? Well, all sorts of places. After the organ grinders came out, a playwright by the name of Leonard Gersh, who wrote Butterflies Are Free, among other things, it was someone who I met through a friend of mine. He read it and sent me a funny email about, this is great. I think you should turn this into a musical with the transgenic baboons, and people are singing all these songs. Like I left all my parts in San Francisco, and love is just around the cornea. And, it was very funny. And then he wrote some lyrics to, a couple of verses to a song. And I thought it was very funny, and I filed it away. Years later, I saw a story about a guy in Georgia who was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease. And so he's going to die. He says he had a better idea. Why don't you take all of my organs and I'll die that way? 8 people get to live who would otherwise die, and I don't have to suffocate to death. Well, I could never find any proof that he tried any actual legal maneuvers. The main problem is that absent some sort of exemption from the state, a physician wouldn't be allowed to do that because it would be homicide.
Right.
But I thought that's just a great story, that someone would, offer, would be that altruistic. And since then, several other people have tried, have said they wanted to do that as well and have not been allowed. So I merged those two ideas. Leonard's idea about making a musical about transplants somehow, and the story of somebody who's going to die trying to donate all of his organs as his means of death. So then California passed AB 15, which is a physician-assisted suicide law.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's it. A guy gets diagnosed with, and my guy, of course, doesn't just get diagnosed with one terminal disease, he gets two. So he's got Lou Gehrig's and a glioblastoma, a terrible brain tumor. And so he's got two friends. One is his doctor, the other is an attorney. And so they realize, well, he doesn't want to do AB 15 because he hasn't accomplished anything in his life. He wants to try to do something before he dies. Then they say, well, why don't you donate a kidney? Oh, that's a great idea. I'll donate a kidney. And, well, why don't I donate, everything? I mean, it's a little more gradual than that, but he goes from, can I just donate a kidney to, hey, take everything. And, so they realize he's signed his organ donor card and he's on the registry. So he's made a contract with the state where he's legally, no one can interfere with his right to donate his organs. He is also, now that AB 15 is passed, legally free to have physician-assisted suicide that no one can interfere with. So these two laws conflict. If you do AB 15, you can't donate your organs because of the way the law is written. You have to do it. You have to be at home and take I think it's Seconal, phenobarbital of some sort. And by the time you're pronounced dead and you get to the hospital, your organs aren't viable for the most part. So they want to go to so we're gonna sue the bastards. And so they go to court, but when the word gets out and the public hears about this, there's a knock at the door, and there's this guy, very finely dressed gentleman, Leonard Stratton is his name. He says, he's a Broadway producer, and he wants to make an opera out of this story. Well, okay, more like Les Mis. Little Shop of Horrors. And he's written a bunch of songs. And they keep trying to kick him out, except that the guy, who's dying thinks it's a great idea. If I'm not allowed to do what I want to do, at least if this guy tells my story, I will leave something behind. So they sort of partner up while the legal team is pursuing the court cases. And it's all the legal research is fascinating. And it's going on in other parts of the world where, kidney sales, might not be the worst thing that could happen. And of course, 10 years ago, oh, no, you absolutely can't sell your organs. It's going to do nothing but prey on the poor. So it's like, well, you mean if a rich guy said he wanted to sell, it would be okay? No. So anyway, the legal stuff is interesting. And in fact, in Canada, several people have been allowed to do this. Their terminal diagnosis, they say, no, why don't you take my organs, save some people's lives? I'm going to die anyway. So it's fascinating, moral, legal stuff. And then you've got this guy who's written all these crazy songs, and he produces, in the course of the things, he produces a musical, and we sing the songs throughout the book, which I think will be interesting when they do the audio book, because you'll be able to actually sing.
I love it.
But so he took a bunch of public domain songs because, it's cheaper. And he just rewrote the lyrics. So, for example, let me find a good one here. That's a good one. That's a good one. Oh, I like that one too. There's a song, "The Midnight Special." So they found you in the bathtub, just chilling in the ice, and on the mirror in lipstick, a note that really wasn't nice. Said you better call a doctor and you better do it soon. We took one of your kidneys and we did it with a spoon. I had the midnight surgery up in the motel room. I had the midnight surgery. It weren't no honeymoon. So anyway.
I love it.
and there's another couple of verses and choruses, and it's ridiculous. But it's Leonard Gersh's idea from 20 years ago about let's turn this into a musical, merged with this news story I saw, and it came out great.
That's fabulous. When is the book coming out?
They are going to. It's next year.
Uh-huh.
And so they're going to republish all the books, and I think one will be published each month. And I don't know. I've got to look at the contract again to see if the 4 organ books will come out one after another, or if they're going to spread them out, and if the new book will be in the middle of things or at the end of things. I don't know for sure. I don't even know if they know for sure yet.
Well, I can't wait. I'm going to have to update my library.
Yes, you do.
Oh, that's great. So, okay. So you've got that. You've got music. You explore, like I can sort of look at your body of work and explore the different themes you have explored. What haven't you explored with your books that you want to?
Funny things like the death penalty and
Hilarious.
yeah, it strikes me as, and I think, by the way, there have been people on death row who have said, look, if you're going to execute me, why don't you just take all my organs and save 8 people's lives? Because I took a few, and, we'll call it even. But they've not been allowed to do that either. But they will be allowed to sue to get a heart transplant before you execute them.
Weird.
So I don't know. I don't really have some area that I've been wanting to do that. I would just go ahead and do it if I could think of something that made me want to do it that much.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. Do you finish what you were saying? You cut out just a little bit. If you wanted to do it, you would do it, and then I didn't hear the last thing you said.
I think I said yeah.
That one, rim shot. All right, I love it. So do you plan things out? Do you plan your plots out? Are you like a planner or a pantser? How does that flow for you?
I'm more planner. 1, 2, 3, 4 of the books, came about. They were screenplays or teleplays or stage plays first. A Perfect Harvest is the name of the book that'll be out next year. And I wrote it as a stage play because it had the songs in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know, it didn't occur to me that I could, put that in the book somehow. But after I got this call from this publisher who said, "Are you working on anything?" And it's like, "Oh yeah, I've got this novel I'm working on." It was really the play, but they liked the idea. And once I figured out what I did was, instead of making it a third person omniscient narrator, which all the other books are, I decided to have Leonard, the producer, be the narrator of the book. And so he could, and he could start singing his songs. And he would explain, or after he sings, when at work or at play, hear those organ grinders say, "Have you got any organs today?" And he sings the song. And then afterwards, the lawyer says, "Isn't that the caissons go marching in?" So you can, if you didn't recognize, you wouldn't recognize the tune until he explained it. You could go back and sing the song to yourself, right, instead of just reading it as lines with a rhyme scheme. But so with the other ones, he prefaces, that song, "God rest ye merry gentlemen, you need a nice pink pancreas, my surgeon said to me. The one you got is all but shot. On this we all agree. Get on the list and do it now or you'll be history." So if you tell people ahead of time what the song is, then they can read the lyrics, and all the songs, or most of the songs, are ones that most people will be familiar with.
Right.
What was the question?
Don't worry about the question. We're on to the next thing. So yeah, and I really hope that your audiobook narrator for this is also a singer, because that they're going to have to be in order to do that, to do it justice.
Yeah, no, absolutely, because the guy sings the song.
Yeah, no, that's phenomenal. So let me ask you. You said, we were talking about, are you a planner or are you a pantser?
Oh, that's it.
No, that's okay. That's okay. As as I said to you before we started this conversation, where we go is where we go. But I do wonder, um, COVID, how has it affected your writing schedule? Or do you have one? I'm like Hemingway, I wake up in the morning and I write 800 words no matter what? Or is there a different style to which you're accustomed?
No, I like it. Well, it depends on how enthused I am about whatever I'm writing. And I think it also has changed over time. Uh, Early in my career, I was very excited that I was able, that I was being paid to do this. And I was constantly thinking about it as I went to sleep. I would wake up early, get in here and get to work. Um, as I've gotten more experienced, it's like I don't. I'll come in here with coffee and read the news and think, yeah, I need to get to work, and then I'll get to work. I mean, I like to try to work on it every day, um, and sometimes you'll just get in a groove and just work, work, work. Sometimes it's like, it's just not happening. I'll write a few bad things and I'll go walk the dogs. With this book, which happened to coincide pretty much the beginning of the quarantine, it kind of worked good. It gave me something to do while staying safe. And now that you don't have to go to a library to do any research, actually, well, I mean, I've got 4 accordion files about nearly a foot thick each, probably 9 inches thick each, with all this organ related research that I've done through all these organ related books. So, in addition to whatever I need to find online, I've just got tons of stuff in my files. So I could stay here, work, a little bit every day or all of, some days. And it really helped. And I think I did it in 5 months, which is probably the fastest I've written a novel. So it didn't, you can't run the experiment twice. I don't know how I would have written this in normal times.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Sure. Yeah, it is. And I have to wonder how people who are creative, how creative people's work is going to be affected by these last 6 months. We can't, can we ignore it? Can we, what is it going to do to the body of work that's being developed or has been created now over these last 6 months and into the new future? I find that something that sort of I noodle around a lot, because I talk a lot to creative people, and a lot of people like you have gotten many things done, and a lot of people are going, I can't even put my fingers on the keyboard because I'm just so stressed or overwhelmed or whatever. So
Right.
I'm glad that you were writing more books for me to read, which is great. But that leads me to the next question, and that is, what do you read?
Oh, I'll answer that in just a second. But as you were talking, I did, early on, wrote to the publisher and said, so are we incorporating or ignoring COVID in this book?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, that comes up a lot with my people who are writing books for us. And we decided to ignore it. That there was just there were no upsides to it.
Mm-hmm.
It was a layer that wasn't intended for the story. And while you could do it, it would not be helpful to the story. And so anyway, that that came up, and I think I know it's come up with other writers I know.
Mm-hmm.
And for the most part, it's no, we're just going to write it in a normal world. There's will no doubt be plenty of COVID stories told.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So anyway, there's that. I just finished reading a book called Astral Weeks and there's a long subtitle, the secret the secret story of something something something. And it's set in Boston in the late 60s, early 70s, and it's fascinating. Van Morrison was in Boston, and he was, that's where he wrote the early parts of his famous album Astral Weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And all this stuff, I just I didn't know that he was ever in Boston, let alone that's where that got started. But it branches off into a lot of other weird stuff that was going on with Jim Queskin's jug band, and something called the Fort Hill Community, which is this commune in Boston that had this a guy named Mel Lyman, who was sort of a messianic and sort of a cult leader. And it was fascinating, an underground newspaper. And so, I was young what was I? 11 years old in 1968. And I was in Jackson, Mississippi, not in a big city like Boston, but we had a little underground newspaper, and you knew about cults.
Mm-hmm.
So reading about all this stuff, that was interesting. I just started reading Parnell Hall's new book, Chasing Jack.
Mm.
I've also got John Bilheimer's book, Hitchcock and the Censors, which is about just what you'd think it would be about. Alfred Hitchcock navigating the the Hays Code,
mm-hmm.
And how he managed. He would, write stuff into his screenplays that had to be approved by the code people. So he would put in stuff that he didn't really want, but he knew they would want to take it out, and he would use that as a bargaining chip to keep something else in.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think those are the three. So yeah, just finished the Astral Weeks, just started Parnell's book, and I sort of pick up John's book because it's nonfiction. It's not an ongoing story. I can pick up and read about how did he deal with Rear Window, So I periodically pick that up and read a little bit more. I don't read as much crime fiction. I guess Parnell's book will be, a crime book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I used to read a lot more crime fiction than I do, but I'm now very curious I'm a huge Hitchcock fan, so I'm very curious about the book you're talking about. I love the idea that he was anchoring. It's typical negotiation tactic. I'm going to anchor this. I'm going to tell you that for you, this candy bar is going to be, it's normally $57, but for you, it's going to be $30. Oh, okay. I'll take the $30 candy bar. Yeah. So,
and I was willing to settle for $22.
Right. Exactly. And so he did it. Good for him in that way, at least.
And John's a terrific writer. I like his crime novels that are set in West Virginia coal country.
Mm-hmm.
But the research he did on this was fascinating, in depth, thorough. I saw him we always have a dinner at the book conventions, Balshikon or Left Coast Crime, and we were at Left Coast Crime in Reno several years ago, and he was telling me about this, and I was like, couldn't wait, and it finally came out. So yay!
I love when a book that you really, really want is you can finally get it in your hot little hands. I want to pivot. I don't want to keep you too long because I know you have a life to get back to, and
not really.
Keep you. Oh, okay. Well, then let's talk. So I do want to ask you about the business of writing. How do you navigate the business of writing versus the creative aspects of writing?
Well, first of all, you hope there will be some business.
True.
And sometimes you have to try to, make some business, which means you work on spec. But I guess I had always, after radio, when it was, you're here in Los Angeles, you want to write sitcoms, you've got to write sample scripts. You've got to write those spec scripts.
Mm-hmm.
And, and nobody's paying you for it. And after they read one or two and they don't like those, you've got a choice of either keep shopping those around, which is a bad idea because people have already read them, words out that those scripts aren't any good, and you're not writing anymore and you're not getting any better at it. So you've got to, motivate to keep doing that so that you can drum up some business.
Mm-hmm.
And once you if you drum business up, it's a lot easier to go find an agent then, because I've already got 10% waiting for me. Great, I'll sign you. And literally, I was living on Radford Avenue in Studio City, and right down the street in the same address block as the CBS studios, where Roseanne and a bunch of other shows were being shot at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I sent my spec script into an agency and followed up with the receptionist. So I learned that lesson. Never try to get past the receptionist, because you're not important. I need to talk to the important guy. Treat the receptionist as the most important person in the world, because they're at the gate.
Right.
They can let you in or not. So she read the script, liked it, passed it on. She put me through to Stu Robinson, the one of the primary agents at Robinson Weintraub Gross, who said, I love the script. I see you're over there on the lot. Why don't you come in and we'll talk? He thought, based on my address on the script page, the cover page of the script, that I was already working at a show on CBS. So he was automatically going to get a commission.
I love it.
That's the only reason, I'm pretty sure, that I got in. And so, but, once you've got it, if you have an agent, then the business part, that's their problem. I mean, you can talk about, what the negotiations are. Shouldn't we ask for this? Can we get that? But and then having said all that, and had agents for most of my books, the deal that I signed with Farrago, who will be publishing all the books next year, I've got enough contracts around here from large and small publishers that I can compare and look at the royalty rates, how did you get the reversion of rights? Can we change the language here? Can we delete this paragraph? And I just, did that myself. So, I mean, and along the way, mistakes were made. not for that contract, but, with having written a screenplay with someone that had we sold it, we would have split 50-50. Then I spent a year turning them into novels, which we then sold the film rights to. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we had a lawyer representing us as a team, writing the contract up. And so, it's like, a little bit of a conflict of interest when the rights are being sold to the book that I wrote based on the story that we had come up with together. There should have been somewhat of a carve out for the work I did to do the adaptation from which those rights that we were originally trying to exploit were finally sold. I'm sure that doesn't make sense if you just hear me say that. But, live and learn.
It's navigating all of that confuses me. Even if I did understand exactly what you said, I was still confused. So no, I mean, it's hard because for so many people, this idea of an agent, that you don't get an agent until you actually don't need an agent anymore. It seems to be pervasive.
Well, actually, I mean, the TV story, it's funny just because it's sort of like, that's an agent for you. But with the books, I had no idea what to do, and then I read a book. You write query letters, and you can buy a list of all the literary agents in New York for $10, and I did. And I wrote a query letter. It was probably too long, but I thought it was funny. And sent it out to 10 agents, and decided that every time I got a rejection back, I would send out 2 more queries. Mm-hmm. And after 125, 130 rejections, somebody finally said, this is hysterical. I want to be your agent. And boy, did I need one, because at that point, there was no way any of the big houses were going to read my manuscript. I didn't, yeah. You don't know, you have no idea who to go to.
Right.
That's what the agent does. The agent knows they're looking for this, they're looking for something else. This is the perfect person to send it to. Jimmy Vines, who was my agent, who, sort of made my entire career, I needed him. He was great.
Oh, and that's wonderful. It's wonderful to have someone who thinks your work is hilarious and believes in it enough to really push for it, which I'm glad, for all our sake who get to read your work. I'm super glad. But what I'm wondering, if a new writer came to you and said, "What would you tell me about, I want to write full time?" What would you say?
Well, I just did this. A friend of my brother's, has finished a novel, and so we talked. And there's nothing you can do. It's like, you've written the book, congratulations. Now you've got to, you've got different choices than I had when I was starting, because there was self-publishing. Then was, you pay somebody to print the book up,
Right.
or you went to Kinko's and you made copies and you bound it yourself. Now you can, print, you can publish a very good looking print on demand book through Amazon.
Right.
Along with 10 million other people, and nobody knows about it because everybody else is screaming, "Read my book,
Right.
listen to my album, look at my new film that I made on my telephone." So good news and bad news. You can get worldwide distribution. Unfortunately, no one in the world knows you're doing it.
Right.
But so all you can do is send those query letters out to agents, and be aware that there are smaller publishers. While it's nice if Simon and Schuster wants to publish your book and buy end caps and do online marketing, odds are against that happening. But all you can do is pursue it. You just got to keep knocking on doors and ignore the people who reject you, because that doesn't do you any good. The rejection doesn't help, and worrying about the rejection doesn't help. Just go to the next door, knock on that one, and just keep going as long as you believe that it's worth, that this is a good piece of work, and somebody's going to want this. And nobody wants to. I think mainly what people want, and I know I did when I spoke with writers, whether they were TV or screenwriters or novelists, I wanted them to say, "Here's what you do."
Right.
Oh,
here's the secret.
there's yeah. I'll send it to you in email. It's easy. Everybody, it doesn't exist. You just people, when I see people, I've had 27 rejections from agents. It's like, oh, you're just barely getting started then.
Right.
And I'm sorry, but it's just not, it's not easy.
Yeah. Call me when you've gotten to 200 rejections, then we'll talk. Right.
Sure. I'll even talk to you at 150.
I love it. So okay. I want to, that makes all sorts of sense. And yet you keep doing it. And it's not just the agent, right? Some of it is social media. Some of it is other things. What do you do as an author to engage your audience, to engage new people, to engage the people like me who are waiting for your next book? What do you do?
Probably not as much as I should. I tried Twitter for a while and I didn't get it. And the amount of time that some people spend on various platforms to promote themselves is an amount of time that they could be writing something really good. The stories I've heard about, this person who was rejected by agents and publishers, and then, published something through Amazon and is, posts, some ungodly number of things per day, per platform. It's like, well, when are you writing the next book, and how good is that going to be? Comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm on Facebook, and periodically I will say something about, oh, my book Heart Seizure is similar to this news story that came out.
Mm-hmm.
But I really haven't actively promoted, well, except when, say, Human Resources came out, and I reached out to 25, and I hate that phrase. I can't believe I used it. Reached out. I got in touch with, 25 or 30 writer friends. And instead of asking them for a blurb on the book, I said, I'm going to send you a 1, 2, 3 page section of the book. I want you to blurb that. So I'm not taking up much of your time. It's a different approach to doing it. And it would give me 30 blurbs.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you can be insulting, you can be funny, you can be like, whatever you want. And then for 30 days on my Facebook feed, I would post, the blurb with the cover of the new book and so forth. So, that was my idea of a clever internet marketing, social media marketing program.
Mm-hmm.
And I may have sold 2 or 3 of those books. I have no idea. I don't even keep track of it. It's like, yeah, I've done the work. It's good. The good news is, having established myself to whatever degree I've established myself, people might go searching Amazon to see if I've done something new.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's so hard to push media into people's lives. Everything now is pull. If I'm curious about whether, this is maybe not a good example, of whether Carl Hiaasen has written a new novel, I can go look for it. If I find it, I can pull it into my life. Turns out he's with, Simon & Schuster or some, I forget who he's with, but my feed is full of his ads for his new book,
right?
Which I look forward to reading. But I'm at least established enough, because I was with a big house for 10, 15 years, that people might go looking for my work on their own.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just no way I could afford a serious ad campaign online or anywhere else. What was the question?
You've answered it. It's what do you do to engage your audience? And it's interesting because people like me, I follow you on Facebook, so I will see when a new book is coming out, or we can go to your website or something like that. Speaking of which, that's BillFitzhugh.com, so that you, if you're listening to this, can go to Bill's website and find his amazing books. But also this idea of engaging an audience, I feel like it's a little strange to ask it this way, because we don't spend time in bookstores, sadly, anymore.
Right.
But I remember when my husband first brought home Organ Grinders, he was working at USA Today at the time, and it was on the slush pile. And he said, Isolde, you need to read this. And I started reading it. And then I immediately went to my closest Borders books and sat down with Pest Control, and then went, okay, I guess I have to buy it, because I've now read half the book sitting on the floor in the store. So that is what ended up happening. That's how I got to you. I read Organ Grinders, loved it, and then immediately went and found Pest Control. And that idea of the first page, the first 2 pages, you start reading one of your books. Hyacint's books do similar. Like you've been saying, you put normal people in abnormal circumstances, but it's not just abnormal, it's ratcheted up. There's never a status quo in your book for any of your books for very long. Things just keep happening, and it's engaging, because I wanted to know what kind of wacky thing would happen next. And so the question I'm asking now is not just how do you engage an audience, social media in 2020, but how do you engage them with your writing? What is it that you are doing? Are you just telling the story, or is there a more purposeful, I'm going to keep ratcheting it up so that you stay around to see what happens next?
And I think the real answer is I've got to amuse myself,
I love it.
because I think if if I think it's funny and interesting, that you should too.
Hmm.
And for some people that will be true. For other people, I've got plenty of 1-star reviews,
Hmm.
and for whatever reason, some books just don't appeal to some people. There's nothing you can do about it.
Right.
So I write just because the story has to do certain things, uh, in order to achieve its storiness. Um, uh, and I've got to be interested, and I've got this research I've got to get from this point A to point Z here. And since I'm supposed to be a comic novelist, I think it better be funny.
Hmm.
And periodically, but you can't keep it funny like at the top of a roller coaster the whole time. You got to bring it down, and there are some normal moments. There might be a sad thing here and there, um, but yeah. So it's mostly I'm entertaining myself. Um, and here's something that'll be depressing for writers, um, in terms of uh, trying to reach an audience these days. I had, because of radioactivity, I was doing a book tour, and I was in DC, and I got invited to XM. They weren't merged with Sirius yet,
Hmm.
to do some interviews and publicity for, I guess it was Fender Benders actually, that I was promoting at the time. So I was on one of their country channels. But I met a guy named George Taylor Morris, who was the program director for the Deep Tracks channel.
Hmm.
And we talked, and I had a background in FM rock radio, and I knew what they were doing. I wasn't a subscriber yet. But then one thing led to another, and I ended up with a half-hour show for 5 years on the Deep Tracks channel. And so I was, I didn't use it completely as a platform to talk about me and my books. It was about the music that was in the show. But I was always able to say, I write novels. You can go to my website. And so I was able to promote my website and my books on Amazon on a nationally, satellite delivered radio show to who knows how many thousands, hundreds of thousands of people.
Hmm.
And yeah, I'm not sure you could really tell from the sales that I had that sort of a platform.
Hmm.
So just all of which goes to show it's like it is hard to get anybody to pay attention to your new book, your new record, your new movie, your new TV show when there are so many of them.
Hmm.
So, but so you can either quit or understand that that's the world you're living in and keep doing what you're doing.
And amen to that, because that idea of you better believe in it and you better love it because you're going to be doing a lot of it. It's it's
And you
important.
might not be getting much in return.
Yeah. It's so much of this, so much of creative work is for the love of the game. And yet it would be so nice if the writer got paid for writing and the painter got paid for
Right.
painting. But
And another thing to keep in mind is what can come about only because you did the work. And then you don't. I got an email one day from an attorney in New York who said, "Yeah, I've been trying to reach your agent." And this, by the way, is the end of the other end of the Jimmy Vine story, who, made me something out of nothing. And then years later, stopped returning everybody's phone calls, including the calls from people who were wanting to buy various ancillary rights to books. He just decided to retire, but didn't tell anybody.
oh wow.
So anyway, I get this email from this attorney in New York saying, "I've got a client who wants to produce a play based on one of your books." And it turned out to be he wanted to make a musical out of pest control, which is like, well, I thought about the film rights because it was a screenplay to begin with, but it never crossed my mind that someone would want to make a play, let alone a musical, out of this thing. But only because I had written the book and stuck through 125 agent rejections, that some guy read the book, happened to be the son of a wealthy man who then comes into some money of his own, decides he wants to be a Broadway producer, and picks my book out of all the books in the world to make a musical, and it ended up being staged in Los Angeles.
I love it.
Nobody was pursuing this. It's
Right.
only because it was out there that that they came to me. And the same is true with this Farrago. I wasn't trying to sell my backlist to anyone.
Hmm.
I wasn't writing a new novel until they called up and said, hey, we know about your books. We'd like to republish all of them. And are you working on something? Yeah. But all of that happened only because I had sat here for decades in a room writing books.
And you have to. I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
that's what it is, right? If you're a natural storyteller, which I believe you are, you can't help but tell stories.
yeah, I mean, it's just that I guess my point was more that you sometimes will be rewarded for work with rewards you had never anticipated.
Sure.
I anticipated the possibility of receiving a very small amount of money for a book.
Mm-hmm.
That would be fantastic. Then it turned out to be a large amount for the film rights to the book, and then publishing rights, and then the stage rights out of nowhere. And then somebody from Germany wants to turn it into a radio show. Well, I didn't pursue that. It's only because I did the work, and then somebody else saw, oh, I'm going to turn this into something else.
Right.
So, without doing the work, none of those things are going to happen.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I meant, that you were telling your stories. You were writing the books you were writing. The other stuff you didn't necessarily pursue, except for because you had the body of work, somebody else could come up with the idea and
Right.
then talk to you about it, which that's phenomenal. I love that's such a testimonial to, sit in the room and, but what they say, but put your butt in the seat and do the work.
Yeah.
So, and I actually walk when I write, but but that's similar. So I know, as I said, I want to be cognizant of your time, but I have just a couple more questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
What are you curious about right now? What are you most interested in exploring?
In terms of writing?
In terms of whatever, what I am always curious about what is it that you're going, I wonder what, or I wonder why. And it doesn't have to be about writing. If you're curious about something, I'm always interested in how your mind works. What makes you go, oh, I want to know more about this?
Well, it's hard, for me at least, not to be pretty focused on politics right now.
Mm.
And just hard to put words to it. It's been such a fire hose of insanity.
Mm-hmm.
And in all sorts of things. I mean, the Black Lives Matter thing reminds me, because I'm from Mississippi, maybe more the opposition from some people reminds me of nothing so much as opposition to the civil rights movement.
Mm-hmm.
Which years later it's like, oh my God, how dumb you look now, having opposed with such vehemence
Right.
that these citizens get some rights.
Right.
Not taking any rights from you, you're just opposed to them getting some.
Right.
And that's what the BLM just you live long enough, you see this stuff happen again. And of course the current administration. So I'm obviously curious. Can Biden Harris beat the current people whose name I just can't seem to get out of my mouth?
I can't either.
And what's going to happen? Will there be any justice on the other end for some by all accounts are illegal activities, or will it be like, no, well, we need to let the nation heal,
Mm-hmm.
and no one's really going to be held to account? and these are, much bigger things in their, than writing, a book, and have, larger consequences for larger numbers of people. So it's kind of, I mean, now that I've finished the book, and the publisher loved it, I do still owe them a short story. So and it's got to be about insects, because it's a giveaway short story to their mailing list to sort of prime them for pest control and the exterminators. So I've got to write that, and I've got like 20 little pieces of story, character, and plot that don't really turn into anything yet. So I've got to get that done. But in the meanwhile, I'm sending postcards to swing state voters,
Mhm.
trying to get something accomplished, and so that's part, and other than just daily everybody's life stuff, which what's for dinner? I've got to go grocery shop, I got to do all that kind of stuff. I will say, uh, and this goes back to some earlier question. I have people that say, what's the one piece of advice you would give to a writer? And my answer is always, you should marry well. Because it's only because my wife worked very hard, and allowed me to, I mean, she agreed to marry me when I wasn't worth a nickel. But she I even cook. So, and I've got a job, so he's nice to have around. So, I was allowed to do all this work. Where a lot of people don't have that luxury.
Right.
If I was putting in 40, 50 hours a week doing something, I probably would have just come home and watched basketball and drank beer. But I was, I had the luxury of being, given the time to write, and wasn't going to squander that. And I didn't. So, I mean, I got lucky in that regard. And luck is a big part of all of this. I was lucky that I happened to find Jimmy Vines. In fact, Jimmy Vines wasn't on the list of agents. It was another agent on the list who turned me down, but said he knew somebody who had just opened an agency, that I queried Jimmy Vines. So that was just luck. It was luck that Jimmy sent the book to a film scout for Warner Brothers, who happened to love it. That person could not have loved it. So just, and then their boss could have not loved it, et cetera. It said just so many things are out of you can't make someone like your work. It's just kind of luck that somebody does,
Mm-hmm.
and they're in the position to do something with it. And that's the only thing you've got in your control is writing the book.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And writing it to the best of your ability. It's funny, what you just said reminded me of a lyric from the musical Pippin, and that is, it's smarter to be lucky than it's lucky to be smart.
Yeah. In fact, I wrote a whole speech in A Perfect Harvest, where the producer is ruminating on luck. And and there's the phrase, luck favors the prepared.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a famous story of an attorney who said, oh yeah, it's all about luck, and I usually find that luck happens at 3 a.m. when I'm in the library doing research.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. when you still have your butt in your seat and you're doing the work.
When you're still doing the work.
Yeah.
It's only because of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and sage advice for sure. And marry well. It's true. That's what my husband and I have trouble with, is that we're both artists. so we're going to have to rely on our cats to support us in our old age. I'm so grateful to you, Bill, for joining me for this terrific conversation, and as I said, I could probably ask you 44 more thousand questions, but I will stop with one last one.
Right.
Well, before I do though, is there anything else that you would want? I know BillFitzhugh.com is your social, and A Perfect Harvest is going to be coming out next year along with your whole body of work, which I'm so excited about. Is there anything else that you want to say about things that you have coming up before I ask you my last question?
Boy, let's think. No, nothing comes to mind.
Okay, that was easy. So I asked this question of everybody who's on the show, and it's a silly little question, but it's one that I find often brings up really fascinating answers. And the
Mhm.
question is this: if you had a plane that could skywrite anything for the whole world to see, what would you say?
Marry well. I mean, that's just good advice. A good friend of mine from Mississippi, Jill Connor Brown, wrote a series of books about the sweet potato queens, and they are hysterical. They're funny. They're heartwarming. They're great, and they have some funny recipes, many involving bacon and chocolate. But one of the points she makes in her books is, I think, something her father used to say to her, which was, be particular.
Mm,
And it's just great advice. I
hmm
mean, and it doesn't matter, what you're talking about.
hmm
Whether you're at the grocery store and it's like, you're looking at the vegetables. Well, you don't want that bell pepper with that bad bruise. Be particular. Get that good one.
Right.
Uh, when you're, looking at who you're going to get married to, be particular.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I might, with her permission, I might skywrite "be particular."
That's great. Marry well, be particular. I love it. I love it.
There are
Well,
variations on the theme.
yeah, I think they serve each other for sure. Well, Bill, again, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure that my entire audience is going to be running out and buying the books, especially when the whole new set comes out. I'm really grateful to you for being here.
Well, it's my pleasure, Zola. Thank you very much for having me.
Oh, so much fun. So much fun. If you enjoyed today's episode, you absolutely know that you need to go to BillFitzhugh.com, find out all about this phenomenal man and amazing writer. My name is Isolde Trachtenberg, and I am so grateful that you joined me for this show. If you're liking what you're hearing, please rate it, review it, tell your friends, subscribe. You know the drill. Until next time, this is Isolde once again telling you to remember to listen, learn, laugh, and love a whole lot. Thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here. Today's episode was produced by Isolde Trachtenberg and is copyright 2020. As always, please remember this is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Past performance does not guarantee future results, although we can always hope. Until next time, this is Isolde Trachtenberg, and I send you all of my love.